you've got a federal grant in your sights, get familiar with grants.gov. And then, of course, the federal agencies, if you're looking for public money, excuse me, if you're looking for public money, all of the federal agencies have a grant site as part of their site. And then Illinois, I am a librarian. Of course, the state library in Illinois has grants for libraries, but other grants, many other grants are available through state government, and many of them are found at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. These are just examples. You can find gazoodles of grants just by Googling, just by getting on your computer and Googling grants for fill in the blank. These are just examples. These are not the only place to go. And I'll tell you that grants are usually from 3 different kinds of sources. Hang on. I'm going to keep you hanging for a minute. They're either from state and federal government, they're from a private organization like Target, or they're from a foundation like the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, the Sloan Foundation, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to show you grants. I know this is tiny. I didn't realize the room would be so big. I'm sorry. But this is the grants.gov interface. And basically, in the circle, I'm sorry you can't see it, is the word library. That's my thing, right? Your thing's going to be something different. But I put library in as a keyword. 7 pages of matches. So there are lots and lots of grants available in this clearinghouse grants.gov. So you should go in there and look at the grants. Okay, so you found the grant you want to apply for. You've made sure that that's the one you want. Yeah, I'm going to go for that one. The first thing to do is this. You talk to the people you work for or you work with. Who is a governing authority? Anybody?
Board of directors.
Board of directors, right. School board, the people you report to. You talk to your governing authority and you make sure they're on board with you submitting this grant, because grants are a lot of work, right? Those of you who've written grants, you know they are a lot of work. So you want to make sure that they're on board, that there's not some big retirement looming, like the fiscal officer is about to retire, and oh boy, that's going to mess up the whole grant application. So you want to talk to them and make sure they're going to be cheerleaders. They're going to say, yeah, all right, let's apply for this thing. Let's do this together. You will need their support as you go through the process, especially for the larger grants. You'll need everyone in the organization to be on board. You'll want to do things like describe to them the conditions that you're trying to address, the need, the reason that you're writing this grant in the first place, and how your project, your grant is going to bring that condition, that need, into a better situation. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay. So you've got your governing authority on board. They've given you the thumbs up. They're like, yeah, let's go for this grant. Wow, this is great. So you sit down to write it. Let's talk about best practices for writing. Some of these things I didn't really realize until I had been writing grants for a really long time. So you want to follow the instructions letter by letter. And I know this may be old-fashioned, but I print out the call for proposals and I highlight it. I make sure that I've read through it a couple of different times. And I follow all the instructions, not just the ones I like, but I follow all the instructions. If I don't understand something, I email this person called the grant program officer. The grant program officer is your friend. They want you to be a successful grantee. They want to say, hey, look at this person we've given this grant to. They've done these great things. This is terrific. They want that person to be you. Talking to people who are applying for grants is their job. You're not bothering them. You're not giving them unnecessary grief when you call them or you email them and you say, hey, I saw this in the application. I'd like to know more about it. I didn't understand. Can you help me understand? So if you don't understand, ask. And you'll see in this presentation, I call the grant program officer the GPO, and I call the notice of funding opportunity or the grant advertisement or the call for proposals, whatever you want to call it, I call it the NOFO, the notice of funding opportunity. Best practice, respond to the NOFO point by point. If it asks for what's your work plan, what's your need, who's your target audience, you know what's going to be in my proposal? Those things exactly in that order. Because you never, ever want to make reviewers hunt to give you the most points possible. Look at this application. They laid it out exactly as it's scored. So when you submit an application, there's going to be a bunch of people usually who are going to score your application, going to give different pieces of it points. So based on a rubric. You never want to make those reviewers hunt for your answer to any question. Never, ever do that. Reviewers usually have like a stack of applications they've got to look at. And if yours is the one that they can just go right through it, yay, that's good for you, right? Does that make sense? Okay. Also, peruse the funder's website. Frequently, the website will have example applications. You can just snarf really good language right out of those applications. That's a really good way to understand what the funder's priorities are. And yes, the funders will have priorities. They have things they're trying to accomplish with their money. So pay attention to what their mission is, what their purpose is, and be sure you address that in your application. All right, more best practices. Many fields, many fields have a lot of jargon, have a lot of initialisms, acronyms. I know it's tempting, especially when you're trying to conserve space. Don't use them or explain them very, very carefully. And believe me, there are people who do grant reviews, grammar, spelling, punctuation. You want to be sure you've really done a good job with all of that kind of thing. Also, I tell people, don't overpromise. Your grant should be focused. It can do this one thing. It can't change the world. It can do this one thing. Be very focused, be very clear about what it is that you're saying your grant can do. And then do it if you get the money. Do what you say you're going to do, how you said you were going to do it. Always. And then avoid using the first person. I, we, our, us. Try not to use that. Instead, put a professional veneer on your grant. The XYZ organization is seeking this funding in order to do whatever. It's not your well, most of the time. Sometimes there are grants to individual people. but most of the time, it's not a grant to you personally. It's a grant to your organization for your target audience. How am I doing? You guys okay? Making sense? Okay, just holler if you have any questions. Say, stop! I need you to go over that again. All right, there is this wonderful little tool. You can Google Bloom's Technology of Measurable Verbs. It's all over the internet. It gives you more powerful words to use than words like, gee, I hope. You don't hope? 5 sessions will require participants to use their new computer skills. Yay! You know, you want to be sure that anything that is kind of wishy-washy, get it out of there. That's not what you want. You want these verbs, right? So look for, you can just Google, I put one link here, but it's all over the internet. Bloom's Taxonomy of Measurable Verbs. Great little tool. So, wrapping it up here about the writing part. You are writing to convince. It's a competition. It's a competition. Say that. It's a competition. You are writing to convince. You want to show how there's this need, this existing problem, and how that problem's going to change because of this great project. It's going to change. The solution is, dun, 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 your grant. You're painting a picture in the mind of the reviewers. All right. 4 common application components. And I'll tell you, I've written a lot of grants. These are I've never written a grant that didn't have these 4. And the way this works is the grant will say, these 5 pieces have to be in your grant application package. And they look like this, 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 and this, right? These are 4 that I always see, always, okay? So the narrative. The narrative is really, this is the thing that the reviewers spend their time on. It's the heart of your story. It's the thing that connects the reviewer with the picture you've painted, the need that you've described. You're using data, of course, you want to use data if you have it. Anecdotal information is great too. If you have the room, you can tell a story, you can relate how this need affects this family, this person, whatever. That's always good. You want reviewers to remember, hey, I read this proposal. That was amazing. You want them to remember the application and say, well, we got to fund that one, right? That's what you want. So you want to have some kind of connection with the reader. And you want to describe how the items you've asked for in your budget are going to support the project activities. We'll talk more about budget right now. So this is just a mock-up of a budget. Usually, the funder will give you grant categories. They'll give you categories that look like salaries and wages, consultant fees, travel, supplies and materials, equipment, da-da-da-da-da. And they ask you, especially if the grant is for longer than a year, they ask you to do years. So year 1, year 2. Okay? You with me? Am I making sense? Okay. So usually, not always, but many grants have this thing called indirect costs. We could spend an entire evening talking about indirect costs. We won't. I'm just going to tell you that it's usually funding that is given to the organization that is administering the grant. And it's for things like keeping the lights on, running the water, plowing the snow in the parking lot. It's not attributed to the grant. It's what it costs your organization to support a grant. So in this example, and it's only an example, indirect costs are capped at 10%. Sometimes they're capped, not capped at all, I should say. Sometimes they're capped lower, sometimes they're capped higher. It really just depends on the NOFO. So your budget will usually do a total of direct costs, a total of indirect costs, and then a total of all project costs. So in this example, again, just an example, it's a $35,000 grant. You okay, or did I lose you? Do you need a cookie? Okay, if you need a cookie, get a cookie. All right, cookies always help. All right, so that's just an example. These are very common categories. And here's some FYIs. The NOFO will likely include things that are okay to ask for with this money and things that aren't okay. Things that aren't okay, it just depends on the grant offering. But usually alcohol is on that list, right? Any kind of like party can't really have with grant funds. So usually usually construction, unless it's specifically a construction grant. Construction, building this podium or building shelves in the library. Yes?
Question, when you say construction, because actually that's my field.
You're going to look for a construction grant.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
For an internship for at-risk youth and people that are, looking for trade. I'm a trade guy. I grew up in the 70s. Everybody beyond, before me and toward the late in the 80s, they had trades in high school and all that. So that's something that I see that's taken away from all the schools and replaced with stuff that's not useful.
So you are looking for a grant, if I can paraphrase, because I have a microphone and you don't, if that's okay. Tell me if I get it right. You're looking for a grant that will support people learning trades. Okay, so that is not like the same thing as a grant that would pay for this riser or this podium. But there are grants out there that do that kind of, there are so many grants out there. I'm sure you've seen them on the web, right? If you Google grants for fill in the blank, there are grants out there like that. There really are. So you want to find a grant that will accommodate whatever it is you need. You'll need to talk about why this is a problem. Because they don't teach it in school anymore, just what you said, right? You'll need to establish the need, develop a work plan. You'll need to put all of that in your application. So many of these budgets will do things like mention cost share or matching funds. So that just means if I'm the organization giving the grant and I give you $100, I want to see that you have $100 of your own that you're going to put into it. That's cost share, cost matching. It's named different things, and you have to read the NOFO, read what the funding organization wants you to do. And as I said on the budget example, they can cap the indirect cost rate. They can also ask for forms and assurances and certifications, and may require that you do certain things as part of your project, that you use a certain technology. And this goes back to the mission of the funder. The funder has certain things they're trying to accomplish with their money. So they may have something they want you to do as part of your project. So be sure you read the NOFO. All right, outcomes. This is something that is outcomes and evaluation. Can I see a show of hands? Have you heard of outcomes and evaluations? Okay, so this, again, is a whole week of class that I teach, all right? But basically, I've given you this Mad Libs. And it's a fill in the blank. So you start over here. For my project, my target audience is, I'm just going to take your example, sir, if that's okay. People who want to go into the trades, but don't have the training, right? My project should change this for the target audience. And you should express this in terms of knowledge, skills, behavior, attitude. So my project will change. They will learn how to do carpentry, plumbing, electricity, or electrical work. By how much? 80% of the people who start will finish and have a trade. And I'm going to use the following evaluation tool to measure my impact. So I'm going to do survey, test, or observation of the people participating, of my target audience. Does that make sense? This Mad Libs is great. I love this. It really helps think through what your outcomes are going to be. And you have to have some sort of evaluation. In my field, a pre and post test of the people participating in the project is usually a great way to evaluate. All right, so here's a sample. Is it measurable? Well, I'm going to say 80%. 80% are the participants described. 80% of the adults participating, that's 80 of the 100 participants, what change took place? Will gain the confidence to search the XYZ database. Is a timeline evident? They'll find that information after attending 3 classes provided by the grant. You got your outcome statement right there. All you have to do is use this outcomes Mad Libs, and it helps you write your outcome statement. You with me? Make sense? Questions? Yes?
So if you're applying for an art grant and it's for you, you'll probably say like, don't use I.
Okay.
How would you do that?
That's a different, if it's for you personally, then you're going to use I, of course. But the grants I've written, that's not, I've never done that. So you're ahead of me. I've never written a grant just for a person, but if it's just for you, yeah, you're going to use I, we, our. Yes. Yes.
If someone has already gotten to this point in the process of learning how to prepare a grant, is this the process that you apply to the application, the format, and everything, or do you just attach, is it something that you attach it to the application?
What a great question.
Because I have a format and everything, and that's I've been stuck in limbo for almost a year and a half.
Oh dear. Okay, so here's the thing. Every grant is different. Every grant is different. This is a perfect question. The question was, for those of you who couldn't hear it, do I just take all of these pieces and parts and attach it and send it in? No. You look at what the application requires you to submit, and you respond to that application in the order that it's presented the questions. So I'm just giving you some examples, some things that are common. The grant application you guys fill out may not have any of this, but usually they do. So does that help, sir? Does that answer? Okay. All right. It's being recorded on YouTube.
And if you'd like a copy of the slides, you can take my business card, shoot me an email, and I'm happy to send them to you. Yeah, and I also recommend signing up for the business mailing list because then you'll learn about all the events and you can reach out to me about past workshops we've had too if you want to get slides and grab one of my cards out on the back table and I can definitely send you a copy. And we will also be putting this on our YouTube channel so you can go back and watch it.
So you can get the slides, you can watch the recording. And my email was on the slide with my dog. So if you want to email me questions, please feel free. The other common piece of grant applications is a schedule of completion or timeline. going down one column, you have, this is the format I usually use, have the activity, the major activity, and then going across the other axis, you have the months. This is a 2-year grant, I believe. So, 24 months. Activity 1 is in the first couple of months, and so on and so forth. So this is a typical timeline schedule of completion. This is actually a great planning tool because filling something like this out forces you to sit down and think, okay, what are the major activities and in what order do they need to happen? It's a really helpful thing for you to fill this out as you're submitting or filling out your application. Okay, I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions. So, the funder's point of view. The funder's point of view is that once that NOFO is published, it's carved in stone. So it is a open and fair contest. They can't change it once it's posted, once it's out there. That would change the rules for everyone. So it's carved in stone. Why are we talking about the funder's point of view? Why are we talking about this? Who can tell me? Why would, yeah?
We have to convince them.
It's a competition. You have to convince them. You want to know what they're thinking, where their priorities are, where they want to target their money, right? So you want to be sure you have thought about whatever it is you're doing from their point of view. You've looked at their website, you've figured out what their priorities for funding are, all of that good stuff. So to them, consistent, fair practices are really important. They want to be sure that they treat everyone the same way. And part of that is this isn't a popularity contest. It's not who you know. I've never known a granting organization like that. There are so many factors that weigh in decisions, and many of these competitions are incredibly, incredibly competitive. Competitions are competitive. That didn't make a lot of sense. Many of the calls for proposal are very, very competitive. We'll have many, many applications for $1, right? So they have to think about, am I awarding grants in all of the regions that I cover, in all of the categories that I cover, in all of the organization types that I cover? Am I getting a good spread? I'm not putting them all in one city or all in one type of organization. So you may have a totally wonderful application, but they couldn't get to it because they had to spread the money out all over whatever, organizations, the state, whatever. And to them, once you get a grant, your record of grant management matters. Sending in your reports on time, making sure that you fulfill the requirements of the grant, going back to that, do what you said you would do the way you said you would do it. All of that matters. So from the funder's point of view, you want to be a good grantee. Let's talk a little bit about the grant program officer. Many, many times, the grant program officer has written the NOFO. They've put it together. And again, these people are your friends. If you look at a grant on the website, it'll say, for questions, contact Susie Smith. Susie Smith wants you to get this grant. She wants you to be the best grantee they've ever had. Believe me, this is her job. You should research the NOFO before you contact the GPO. And I strongly, strongly recommend that you do get in touch with the GPO when you've decided to apply for a grant. Ask them questions. ask them if they will read a draft of your application before the due date. Some programs allow this, some programs don't. Some programs may not allow a phone call, but will allow an email. It just depends on the funding organization. If you are able to schedule a conversation, make sure that you have your questions ready and listen to what they have to say. If you Google this article, this is a hot link, but if you Google this article, what to say and not to say to program officers, it appeared in the Chronicle of Higher Education. That'll give you some more hints as well. But the GPO wants your program to succeed. Okay, this picture was taken a number of years ago when I was still at the State Library. And as I said in the beginning of the presentation, the State Library was responsible for state and federal grant dollars to libraries in Illinois. At this time, we still received grants in paper. This whole thing was grant applications, right? So, think about the grant reviewer who's reviewing, even part of this stack, right? It's really important that you write for the organization you're applying to, make sure your project aligns with their reason for grant making, and also that you write for the review process, that you've made your application easy to review. Easy to review. Reviewers only know and can only score you on what you've told them in your application. They aren't able to say, oh, well, John Smith, here's what he really meant. They have to look at what's in the application and score you on just that. So don't assume that they know anything about your project, are, simpatico with your need. They don't. They can't. That's not fair. And they have a very wide range of expertise. Some of them may not know anything at all about your field or what it is you're trying to do. So you need to tell them what they need to know. And the reviewers' comments are just one thing that the grant-giving organization uses to make their decision. But, if a competition has this many applicants, yeah, it's crazy. So you want to make sure that yours rises to the top. All right, so if your application is funded, you want to be the best awardee possible. You want to let the program officer know about any challenges or program changes, anything like that. If you need to move money around in your grant, communication is key. And always communicate in writing, by email, so that you have a string of what you've said and what they've said. And remember, your success is their success. They want you to be the best grant they've ever had. They want to say, hey, look at this project we funded. Look at the difference it's making. That's what they want. So send pictures, stories, anything you can. Audits are very common, not unexpected. So keep your documentation, keep your records in good order. Follow the rules for expenditure to the letter. No fund lists are real. So if there is a grantee who is not submitting their reports on time, who isn't expending the funds in the way that was approved for expenditure. It is possible as a grantee, as an organization, that you can go on a no-fund list. They are real. You want to be sure that that is not you. So you want to be an excellent grantee. If your application is not funded, it happened to me many, many times. Don't take it personally. The funding organization has lots of things they have to look at, think about. You know, you don't get everything you apply for. You just don't. And you should always, if your application is not funded, talk to the program officer. Say, okay, was this idea just not a good one? Was it not welcome? Is there a way I can rewrite it, retool it? You know, and frequently you'll get the reviewer's comments back in writing. I mean, they'll be anonymous, but you'll get them back. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's no, like an application, say if you're doing an application for a credit card or something, there's no max that you can try to apply for the same grant, where they won't accept any more applications say if you don't get it right in the midst of your preparing everything and you're still trying to reapply, will that violate you in any form?
No. So if you don't get a grant, the question is, again, I'm going to paraphrase because I have the microphone. The question is, if you don't get a grant, can you come back and apply in the next cycle? I think that's your question. Absolutely, positively. That's what I just did last month. I didn't get the grant I applied for last year, waited a year. I applied in this cycle. And I talked to my program officer and I said, you know, is this an idea you want to see again? Is it something you're interested in funding? And you have to be open to hearing, you know, maybe some things you don't want to hear. But it's worth the time. It really is, to find out what the story was. And like I said, you usually get the comments back in writing. Anonymously, I mean, they won't be ascribed to, any particular reviewer, but keep writing. You got to practice. Bottom line, writing a grant is like following a recipe. You figure out what the occasion is, you assemble quality ingredients, you read the recipe over and over with that yellow highlighter. You research anything you don't understand. You ask for help when you need it. Follow the steps in order. Remember that presentation counts. And practice, 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 just like when you're cooking. All right, some common mistakes. You are applying for a grant, and the very first one here, your grant really doesn't fit the funder's mission. So be sure you've read the funder's mission. The second bullet, you haven't followed the instructions. Well, read that NOFO several times. You missed the deadline. This is not negotiable. You have to make the deadline. Have to submit it on time and in the form that they want it. So watch the time zones. Remember that the East Coast, where the federal agencies are, is an hour later than we are here in Illinois. Use the prescribed settings, what they've told you to use in terms of typeface and margins. So I won't read all of these, but essentially there are things that happen over and over and over again in grants and ways to remedy them. Here are some real examples from grant NOFOs. Page limits. Note the page limit for the preliminary proposal narrative in the table above. IMLS, that's the federal funder for libraries, will remove any additional pages and will not send them to reviewers as part of your application. So if the limit is 2 pages and you send 3, the final page is taken off and not sent. Okay? They're serious, all right? They're serious. You really have to follow the instructions. Naming convention. use the naming conventions indicated. If you use any other characters, the application may be rejected. Some pretty serious stuff. So you really, really, really have to follow these instructions. All right, I think I left a few minutes for your questions. So, what can I tell you? Yes, ma'am.
So I'm here on behalf of Design Interior Peace. It's a newly formed charitable nonprofit organization who helps the niche population of hoarders. So when we go to grants.gov, we don't get anything for hoarders. You know,
It's too narrow.
it's so narrow.
You need to come up a little bit.
So like human services. Okay.
Potentially, yes.
So my real question here is regarding the schedule of activities.
Mm-hmm.
So that would look different for each client.
It would.
So what are for the purposes of the grant application, would they want like a holistic picture of how the organization is functioning with working with the client as just being one of the activities?
Every grant application is different. I can't generalize that this is the way it's going to be. Okay, you'd have to tell me which grant you're applying for, and we'd look at the instructions together. And again, if we didn't understand, we'd ask the grant program officer. But you know, usually there are some major activities in any grant. You know, identify clients. That might be your first step. Write out an action plan for them. That might be your second step. Hire a grant coordinator. That might be your third step. So it's the logical steps in the project that you're outlining.
That answers that. Thank you.
Sure, sure. Yes?
I'm curious about how to go about for-profit grants. I know it's kind of limitations when it comes to for-profit than compared to non-for-profit. So is there the best way to go about it outside of going through grants.gov or?
Grants.gov is only for federal grants. Federal grants only. It's not grants from Target or the state government or anything like that. Only federal grants. So I don't know anything about grants for the for-profit sector. However, if I were you, I would work with these wonderful people at the Champaign Public Library to help you search, you know, just do some Google searches to use some of those grant resources that I listed on the, I'm sure Lauren probably has some grant sources.
Yeah, actually, here at the library, we do have a program you can use. You have to use it here at the library. It's called Foundation Directory.
Oh, that's, yep.
And that is, I don't know if you have it or if
Yep.
you mentioned that, but that is a really good resource for grants outside of the grants.gov. If you want grants for your for-profit business, I
Right.
recommend also possibly meeting with me because I stay on top of like what grants City of Champaign is offering, City of Urbana. City of Champaign actually is going to be having some grant funding available starting this summer. We're getting more information about that. We're going to be doing some workshops on that here at the library. But I recommend you take my card. We can sit down. We can talk about, because I also I worked in business and at Habitat for Humanity here locally. So I also know about local grants. You know, there's like Rotary Club.
What a great
there's all
resource.
sorts of, you know, United Way. I mean, there's a lot of like local grants outside of the grants.gov as well. Not that I don't advise, you know, I feel like pursue any grant that you can. But yeah, certain grants are not going to be, you know, be relevant to for-profit businesses, obviously, and also certain kinds of nonprofits. So, but yeah, take my card. We can definitely meet about it. I'm happy to walk you through Foundation Directory, and yeah, sit down and see what your needs are. So.
Yes.
So to kind of go along with following up with that, if you have, say you do have multiple opportunities that you could apply to a grant, can you write multiple applications to go out at the same time to see what you can get back?
You can. Are you talking about writing multiple grants to the same funder or multiple grants to different funders?
Different funders.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just be really sure you haven't done something like put the name of the grant you're applying for in the text and then, oops, forgot to lift it out when you submit it to the other funder. I've seen that. I've reviewed grants that were clearly written for another opportunity. So just be really sure that you massage it. Yes. Yes, sir. I'll come back to.
To follow up to her question, say we had a grant, we need $100,000 for a program, and we write several grants, and say somehow of all the grants, all the grant requests sent out, and then a whole bunch of them approve it, and all of a sudden, we have a $100,000 budget goal, and the approvals come in at say 130,000.
What a great problem to have. You get all the grants you apply for, you have more money than you ask for. So this is a time when you need to be honest with the grant giving organization and say, okay, I had applied to another opportunity, I got this money, but I have this other opportunity in my pocket that really fits this as well. Could we shape this grant somehow so that it would fit the award you just made, but you have to be honest. I mean, because you're going to be doing grant reporting, but that would be, I've never had that problem.
Suppose it's something that happened, and I can't come up with an idea to say use the extra 30,000. I gotta give it back.
You got to give it back. Yep, and that happens.
Okay.
Not to me, but very back row. You've had your hand up for a while.
Thanks, it's kind of in follow-up. One of the problems is finding out about RFAs in a timely manner. You can search, but getting access to those release of requests for proposals in an early manner so that you have time to develop.
I agree.
What's the best way to get access to release of that information?
Most funders repeat grant programs annually or semi-annually even. So if you see one, you're like, oh, that was perfect and I missed the deadline. Just wait. Just, keep watching it. Call the organization, email the organization, say, are you going to offer this again? Is it coming up again? Most of them do repeats of their offerings annually. So keep an eye on the ones you're really interested in is the best advice I can give you. Okay? And I know you had a question, ma'am.
I think you answered it in terms of sending out multiple grants.
Yeah.
With the same information. That was my question.
Putting together an application is a lot of work.
It is.
It's a lot of work. And some of the application packages have many, many, many parts. So you just, the reality is, are you going to have the capacity to assemble 3-4 grant applications, I don't know. That's never been a problem I've had, but hey, that would be a great problem to have. Everybody wants to fund my project. Yes?
I had a question. I know every grant is different. Say you're applying for the grant, you have a question, and you email the GPO, but they're probably going through so many applications and whatnot, and you're not hearing back in time for whatever deadline. Who's your other option, or who would be a good source to kind of find the answers that you need, or do you kind of make it up?
I've never had that experience with a GPO. I mean, they're really the front line to help you, to help me. I've never had that experience. If you did, I would look through their recent grantees because they usually have on their website recently awarded projects, and find one that looks sort of kind of like in the same neighborhood as yours. I don't mean physical neighborhood, I mean topic area neighborhood as yours. Drop them an email, pick up the phone, say, I really have a question. How did you handle da-da-da-da-da? And, they've got their project. They'll probably be glad to help you.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Say you got a company, right?
You own a company? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you own a company.
Okay.
And your company is like for-profit, but you asking for help to train people to get better money. Is that like nonprofit but profit at the same time? Is that possible?
There are not-for-profit organizations as well as state and federal funding organizations that will support job training. I know there are. I would suggest again that you work with these amazing people at the Champaign Public Library to identify those opportunities. You are not out of the running. I mean, there are going to be opportunities out there. You just have to find them. What else can I answer for you? Yes, ma'am.
Like, so one of the issues that, like, we have in our organization is once we get the grants, like, making sure that we, like, spend all the money. Like,
Yes.
grants, like, do grant people, like, look at you bad if you, like, what if your numbers are really good, you serviced all the people that you needed to service, but it just didn't take as much money as you thought?
Don't ever turn back grant money. Don't turn it in. About 6 months before your grant ends, 4 months before your grant ends, contact your program officer and say, hey, we need to spend this money. They don't want it back. 9 times out of 10, they don't want it back. They want you to spend it, and they want you to find a way to spend it on a related project or service to the whatever they've already funded. So get in touch with them. Ask them if you can modify your project so you can expend this funding. So that's the way to handle it best. And if you have to give it back, make sure it's just a teeny weeny little amount, okay? Yes?
Piggyback on her question, when she said open funding. So what, in asking for the funding amount, okay, like they say, like when you're asking for a loan or something, always ask for a little bit more, just in case for any.
Not with grants. You're not asking for more. You're not padding. Do not pad a grant budget. Do not pad a grant budget. The grant budget must be real. It must reflect real expenses, real prices. Well, pretty much down to the cent. Now, you don't ever want to pad a grant budget. That is not a good thing to do. And believe me, it shows in your application. Make the best estimate that you can when you write your application. When you submit the budget, you've done the best job you can in portraying the accurate expenses. Okay? Yes, sir?
What if you go over your
Oh, that's frankly your problem. If you go over, you've got to figure out how to handle it. You've got to find the money somehow. The granting agency is not, oh, you need more money, here you go. It doesn't happen like that. So it is your problem. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
What's a good way to show, like, capacity for your organization? So I work for a smaller, like, nonprofit, and if we did get another grant, we have the opportunity to grow our organization. But, like, right now, we don't have that capacity because we don't have the funding for it. But if we do get that funding, we'll be able to put people in that position to grow the capacity of our organization. So, like, what are good ways to, like, show that in your application?
Talk about the applications you've submitted, your aspirations. You always have to be honest. You must be honest. You must say, this is our organization. Most grants will ask for some sort of organizational profile. Have to tell them what the reality is. However, we've applied for these other opportunities that will allow our capacity to expand in this area or in this area. You can tell them what your aspirations are, what you're hoping will be funded. That's really the best you can do. Does that help? Yeah, okay. Other questions? Yes?
Your other classes you said you teach, how do you get access to those?
So I teach for the libraries, the iSchool at the University of Illinois. It's a graduate program in library and information science. So I'm a librarian. A lot of the people who work here are librarians, and we've gone through a program like that. So, yay, libraries. Be a librarian. It's a great career. So, yeah. Yes? Sure, my email address. Ready? Pens out. A like apple, B like boy, CRAIG, A.B. Craig, at uillinois.edu. A.B. Craig at uillinois.edu. And you can ask me anything. CRAIG, like the man's name, Craig. All right, you've been a great audience. Thank you.